Hello, and welcome again to a Natural Science Talk. In this presentation, I will extremely briefly introduce human anatomy. Now, the body is a complex system of cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems that all work together in an efficient manner. Human anatomy is usually a 2-semester course at the university level, but here we are just going to cover everything in a very superficial manner in this week's topic of human anatomy and nutrition. Now remember, a system of organization is called an organ system, and it's been accomplished to arrange various numbers and kinds of organs together that perform complex functions for the body. 12 major systems include the integumentary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and the reproductive system. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, I just listed 11 systems, but the reproductive system is different for males and females, so that's how you get 12 different systems. Okay, let's get started. So the integumentary system, let's talk about this. Now, you're probably thinking, what the heck is this? I never heard of it. But this system is composed of skin, hair, and nails. So this is the outside part of our body, or just the skin. Did you know that the skin is one of the largest organs in the human body? And it is amazingly complex. One purpose is to keep things inside the body, like blood and tissues, and protect it from the outside environment, like insects and viruses or harmful chemicals. Now, the purpose of nails is to strengthen and support the tips of fingers and toes, and of course to protect the soft tissue of the fingertips from injury as we go about our normal day. We of course can wear socks and shoes, slippers, or gloves to protect the hands, but many years ago we did not enjoy the technology of clothing and instead relied on the strength of nails for digging, scratching, clawing, and so on. Did you know that nail polish was used as long ago as 3000 BC in China? And in Egypt, the color of the nails were even used to signify class rankings. Now, the lower class wore nude or light colors, while the higher class were able to wear red nail polish. Now, the purpose of hair is to keep our heads warm in extreme cold, as well as to protect our scalp from strong UV light from the sunlight. And of course, for centuries, people have styled their hair for beauty and for presenting their social status or culture. Now, a hair follicle shown here is actually a very complex organ with several different parts. The sebaceous glands produce sebum, a type of oil. And acne is a very common problem, particularly during puberty in teenagers, and it is thought to relate to an increased production of sebum due to hormonal factors. The increased production of sebum can lead to a blockage of the sebaceous gland duct, and this can cause a zit, commonly called a blackhead or a whitehead, which can lead to infection by bacteria. When they become inflamed, they of course produce acne. This generally occurs on the areas with more sebaceous glands, particularly the face, shoulders, and the upper chest and back. So there's an example of your hair in the skin. Now, the last thing I want to mention here is the sensation of touch, one of our 5 senses, right? Now, there are many different mechanoreceptors located within the skin that sense pressure, touch, vibration, heat, cold, and so on that give us those itches, tickles, pain, and other sensations. Hair follicle receptors are even able to detect when a hair changes position. So, if the wind blows and your hair gets that tickly sensation, that's mechanoreceptors within the skin. The skeletal system, system number 2, works as a support structure for your body. It gives the body its shape, allows movement, makes blood cells, did you know? And provides protection for organs and stores minerals. The skeletal system is also called the musculoskeletal system. It is comprised of about 270 bones at birth, and this total decreases to around 206 bones by adulthood after some bones in the skull get fused together. This is the vertebral column. We commonly call this the backbone or the spine. And these vertebrae are hollow bones that protect the spinal cord. They fit together and are separated by a spongy disc that can deteriorate over time due to exercise or disease and cause the nerve, it's labeled here on the very bottom left of this slide, to sometimes be pinched by the bone, causing back pain. So we might be tempted to think of bones as just bones, but it is a very important organ. In adults, the production of red blood cells mainly occur in the pelvis, cranium, vertebrae, and sternum. And this occurs on the insides of our bones, which we commonly call bone marrow. The bone marrow is a semi-solid tissue that occupies the spongy portions of bones, and a healthy adult produces about 100 trillion red blood cells every single day to help support our heart, blood, and oxygen intake. We normally take this for granted until a blood cancer affects us, which might necessitate a bone marrow transplant. Now let's talk about the muscular system. The muscular system is an organ system consisting of skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. It permits movement of the body, maintains posture, and circulates blood throughout the body. A tendon is a piece of connective tissue that connects a muscle to a bone. Here in this figure you can see an enlargement of that. When a muscle contracts, it pulls against the skeleton to create movement. A tendon connects this muscle to a bone, making this function possible. Okay? As I mentioned before, the heart is a muscle, and most muscles are controlled by our brains to move when we need them to. Some muscles work automatically, and these include the muscles that control breathing and our heart beating. Muscles are part of many different organ systems as well. Here's a picture of the eye, and you can see there are various muscles involved in eye movement. Our eyes are constantly on the move, and sometimes at night, even when we are dreaming. You may have experienced eye fatigue from watching an electronic device for too long and needing to close your eyes for a bit. This gives your eyes a chance to recover from their nearly constant workout throughout the day. The nervous system is a highly complex system that coordinates actions and sensory information by transmitting signals to and from different parts of the body. The nervous system detects environmental changes that impact the body, then works in tandem with the endocrine system to respond to these events. The nervous system consists of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Okay? So two parts. The central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord. The peripheral system is everything else in the body. So here's the central nervous system. I like to think of the brain as kind of a central computer that processes information. It's the command and control center for the body. This figure shows the popular parts of the brain that are labeled, and you may have seen different labels of the brain that show the areas responsible for vision, hearing, language, emotions, and other functions. Now let's talk about nerve cells, some more details here. The top figure shows a nerve cell. Nerve cells can be very long and spindly, as you can see on the bottom left figure here. It sort of looks like a spider. The long, slender part is labeled as an axon here, A-X-O-N. A close-up view of the axon is shown here in the top center of this slide. The axon is essentially a wire that transmits the nerve signals. The outside of the axon includes a myelin sheath, and if you have ever seen a wire with a copper core and a rubber insulation or sheath, then this diagram of the axon looks exactly the same. Any sort of degradation of the insulin or myelin sheath can lead to neurological disorders and disease. The figure on the bottom right shows a synapse. Okay, a synapse is the gap or spacing between two nerve cells that need to communicate to pass along a signal. The synapse is the area of interaction of two cells that need to pass along the signal. A signal, for example, can pass from the brain to the hand to move it, or the signal can come from the hand to sense touch, for example, and pass this information along to the brain so it can be perceived and processed. Now here is a neurotransmitter. A specific signal molecule is released by a neuron to affect another cell. The cell receiving the signal could be another neuron or even a muscle cell. When these synapses are overstimulated by the use of heroin, cocaine, or other drugs, it can cause the synapses to be damaged. You may have noticed that someone that has used marijuana half their life seems a bit slow. The analogy here can be that the gap is a bit larger, and so it takes more time for the signals to pass from cell to cell. Multiplied by many thousands of cells, this delay in signal transduction becomes quite noticeable. You may be heard of people who use drugs and become paranoid, schizophrenic, or manic depressant, and the analogy here is that the synapse has been damaged and the cells no longer release the correct neurotransmitters or chemicals, so there are a lot of wrong signals being constantly released, and the nervous system is no longer working correctly. Now, the good news is that some medication can partially return the body back within its normal operating parameters. The endocrine system. I'm guessing you haven't heard of the endocrine system or don't know much about it. The endocrine system is a messenger system made up of feedback loops of the hormones released by internal glands of the body directly into the bloodstream, and these regulate distant organs. The hypothalamus in the brain is the neural control center for all endocrine systems. One of the most important functions of the hypothalamus is to link the nervous system to the endocrine system via the pituitary gland. In our bodies, the major endocrine glands are the thyroid glands, adrenal glands, which are right there by the, I think it's the kidneys, and the adrenal, I said that already. So what are glands, you might be asking? Well, endocrine glands are glands of the endocrine system that secrete their products, we call them hormones or chemicals, directly into the spaces between organs that then get absorbed into the body rather than through a duct. This advantage is that these hormones can be circulated around by the heart to reach very distant organs and regulate them. And these glands are the pineal gland, pituitary gland, pancreas, ovaries, testes, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, hypothalamus, and adrenal gland. So quite a few here depicted in this figure. Now let's talk a bit about the thyroid gland, just to pick on one of them. Hypothyroidism is also called an underactive thyroid, or low thyroid, or hypothyreosis. Now, this is a disorder of the endocrine system in which the thyroid gland does not produce enough thyroid hormone. It can cause a number of symptoms, and they're all shown here on the slide, such as poor ability to tolerate cold, a feeling of tiredness, constipation, slow heart rate, depression, and weight gain. Occasionally, there may be swelling on the front part of the neck due to goiter, and untreated cases of hypothyroidism during pregnancy can lead to delays in growth and intellectual development in the baby. The cardiovascular system is up next. Now, the blood circulatory system is a system of organs that includes the heart, blood vessels, and blood, which is circulated throughout the entire body of humans. It includes the cardiovascular system, or just vascular system, that consists of the heart and blood vessels. The network of blood vessels are the great vessels of the heart, including large elastic arteries and large veins. Smaller arteries and capillaries join with small veins. The circulatory system is closed in humans, which means that the blood never leaves the network of blood vessels. This figure on the upper right shows an artery, which is red, and a vein, which is blue on the bottom right, and you can see in between are capillaries. Okay, very, very small, fine capillaries that transport blood. Now, blood, hopefully you only see it here in these tubes, not gushing out of your hand as you hurt yourself gardening or something. But blood is a fluid consisting of plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets that is circulating around the body, carrying oxygen and nutrients to the tissues and waste materials away. Now, circulated nutrients include proteins and minerals. Other components transported are gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, hormones, and hemoglobin, providing nourishment to help fight diseases for our immune system and in maintaining homeostasis by stabilizing temperature and natural pH. The heart pumps blood to all parts of the body, providing nutrients and oxygen to every cell and removing waste products. The left heart pumps oxygen blood returned from the lungs to the rest of the body in the systemic circulation. The right heart pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs in the pulmonary circulation. In the human heart, there is one atrium and one ventricle for each circulation, and with both a systemic and a pulmonary circulation, there are 4 chambers, 4 chambers in total: the left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, and right ventricle. So when I was a kid, they taught us which chamber pumps blood out. They told us to make a V with our arms. The ventricle, you see how it makes the letter V, it pumps out. So that's how you remember the ventricle pumps blood out. The atrium is the other one. It pumps blood in. So the right atrium is the upper chamber of the right side of the heart. The blood that is returned to the right atrium is deoxygenated. That means it's pouring oxygen and passed into the right ventricle to be pumped through the pulmonary artery to the lungs for reoxygenation and removal of carbon dioxide. The left atrium receives newly oxygenated blood from the lungs as well as the pulmonary vein, which is passed into the strong left ventricle to be pumped through the aorta to the different organs of the body. Now, I have this little figure on the upper right. Coronary artery bypass surgery, or just bypass surgery, is a surgical procedure to restore normal blood flow to an obstructed coronary artery. A normal coronary artery transports blood to the heart muscle itself, not through the main circulatory system. Okay, in this image, you can see a tube, this little white tube, going from the artery to the damaged heart muscle to supply it with oxygen. Remember that the heart itself is composed of muscle cells that need oxygen to perform. And so any heart attack that's damaged the muscles cells needs to be reoxygenated, have a sufficient flow of oxygen or blood to the actual heart. So that's the purpose of a bypass surgery. The lymphatic system, or lymphoid system, is an organ system in humans that is part of the immune system and complementary to the circulatory system. It comprises a large network of lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, lymphatic or lymphoid organs, and lymphoid tissues. Those are the little green lines and labeled parts of this diagram that you probably can't see. The vessels carry a clear fluid called lymph back towards the heart for recirculation. The lymphatic system is open, unlike the circulatory system we just talked about. Okay. So the other main function is that of immune defense. Lymph is very similar to blood plasma in that it contains waste products and cellular debris together with bacteria and proteins. Lymphocyte production and activation mostly takes place in the lymph nodes, the spleen, the thymus, and the tonsils. Have you ever heard of someone that had tonsillitis and had their tonsils removed? Well, this is the very reason for that, okay? Fluid from circulating blood leaks into the tissues of the body by capillary action, carrying nutrients to the cells. The fluid bathes the tissues as interstitial fluid, collecting waste products, bacteria, and damaged cells, and then drains as lymph into the lymphatic capillaries and lymphatic vessels. These vessels carry the lymph throughout the body, passing through numerous lymph nodes which filter out unwanted material such as bacteria and damaged cells. Lymph is moved through the system by muscle contractions. When lymph does not properly circulate but build up, usually in the extremities, the condition is called lymphedema. We can see in this figure the patient's right leg on our left, but the patient's right leg looks very swollen, okay? And the left leg looks very small. And this is because lymph is not recirculating correctly, it's building up. For this condition, they normally tell people to elevate their leg, walk around a little bit more, massage, warm water baths, and other remedies may be prescribed. All right, the respiratory system consists of specific organs and structures used for gas exchange in humans, animals as well. For us, the respiratory surface is internalized as linings of the lungs. Gas exchange in the lungs occurs in millions of small air sacs. These are called alveoli. That's the smallest feature of the lung, alveoli. These microscopic air sacs have a rich blood supply, thus bringing the air into close contact with the blood. These air sacs communicate with the external environment via a system of airways or hollow tubes, of which the largest is the trachea. Okay, so the largest feature of the lung is the trachea, which branches in the middle of the chest into two main bronchi. These enter the lungs where they branch into progressively narrower secondary and tertiary bronchi that branch into numerous smaller tubes, the bronchioles. Okay? It is the bronchioles that generally open into the microscopic alveoli in humans. Air has to be pumped from the environment into the alveoli by the process of breathing, which involves the muscles of respiration. So the branching and list of the largest to the smallest structures are shown here in the upper right figure of this slide. And there's a little zoom in of a single branch showing it go from the tracheae to the smaller bronchi to the bronchioles to finally alveoli, which you can't see, they're microscopic. In humans, inhalation at rest is primarily due to the contraction of the diaphragm, okay? And that's the little red-black line there the arrows are pointing to. This is an upwardly domed sheet of muscle that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. When it contracts, the sheet flattens, increasing the volume of the thoracic cavity. The contracting diaphragm pushes the abdominal organs downwards, and the pliable abdominal contents cause the belly to bulge outwards and to the front sides. Because the relaxed abdominal muscles do not resist this movement. Okay? So when you breathe, the stuff in your stomach has to bulge out, right, to make room for that gas. And there's a little diagram there of somebody sitting down breathing, okay? Now, as the diaphragm contracts, the rib cage is simultaneously enlarged by the ribs being pulled upwards by the intercostal muscles. All the ribs slant downwards from the rear to the front, but the lowermost ribs also slant backwards from the midline outwards. This means that the rib cage's diameter can be increased by the so-called upward handle movement. And the mechanics of breathing involves bones and muscles in a very complex movement, but I want you to understand that it's linked a little bit to the bones of the ribs and the muscles that are doing this activity to cause the chamber to enlarge or contract. Now, respiratory therapy, I know, is a 2-year program that covers a lot of biology and chemistry and physics of respiration. Difficult part of the course is learning about gas exchange, and I'm not here to try to teach you that all in like 10 seconds. But keep in mind and know that the primary purpose of the respiratory system is the equalizing of the partial pressures of the respiratory gases in the alveolar air with those in the pulmonary capillary blood. And this process occurs by simple diffusion across a very thin membrane known as the blood-brain barrier, which forms the walls of the pulmonary alveoli. The gas barrier is extremely thin. It's only about 2.2 micrometers thick. and is folded into about 300 million air sacs called alveoli. Remember, the alveoli are microscopic. You can't see them, but there's 300 million of these small little things lining your lungs to help increase the surface area. The surface area of the lungs, as a result, is about as large as a tennis court. That's just mind-boggling. So let me repeat that. The surface area of the lungs is about as large as a tennis court. So as we previously learned, we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. Both of these gases need to be exchanged in this manner. The digestive system is usually the last system learned in human anatomy and physiology. This is because so much about the rest of the body needs to be learned before understanding it fully. The human digestive system consists of the gastrointestinal tract, plus the accessory organs of digestion, such as the tongue, salivary glands, pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. Okay? Digestion involves the breakdown of food into smaller and smaller components until they can be absorbed and assimilated into the body. The process of digestion has 3 general stages. In stage 1, I've outlined that here on the left, we have the smell of food, which causes the release of stomach acids, digestion enzymes, and saliva. Chewing causes the food to mix with the saliva, and eventually we swallow it into our stomach. In stage 2, digestion begins in the stomach with the gastric phase. Here, the food is further broken down by the mixing with gastric acid and the churning action of the stomach muscles until the food is small enough to pass through the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine labeled here on the very lower left. When acid comes up the wrong way into our esophagus, we call that acid reflux, and there are muscles that prevent the acid from coming upwards from the stomach. This figure is part of the small intestine. The third stage begins in the duodenum with the intestinal phase, where partially digested food is mixed with a number of enzymes produced by the pancreas. Digestion is helped by the contractions of peristalsis and segmentation. Gastric acid and the production of mucus in the stomach are essential for the continuation of digestion. Peristalsis is the rhythmic contraction of muscles that begins in the esophagus and continues along the wall of the stomach and the rest of the gastrointestinal tract. This initially results in the production of chyme, C-H-Y-M-E, chyme, which when fully broken down in the small intestine is absorbed as chyle. No relationship to Kyle, who's taken the class. C-H-Y-L-E, chyle, okay? And that actually goes into the lymphatic system. You may have thought always that, when you eat a cheeseburger, it goes into your blood. It does eventually make its way into the bloodstream, but it goes into the lymphatic system, again, which is an open system, which is linked again to the circulatory system, okay? So what I want to emphasize here is that most of the digestion of food takes place in the small intestine. Water and some minerals are reabsorbed back into the blood in the colon of the large intestine, but for the most part, it's absorbed through the small intestine. The waste products of digestion, which we call feces, are defecated from the rectum via the anus. In other words, we go poop. Let's talk about the urinary system. Now, this is also known as the renal system or urinary tract. Now, it consists of kidneys, ureters, bladder, and the urethra. Okay? The purpose of the urinary system is to eliminate waste from the body, regulate blood volume and blood pressure, control levels of electrolytes and metabolites, and regulate blood pH. It does all of that. It just doesn't make us go pee. The urinary tract is the body's drainage system for the eventual removal of urine. The kidneys have an extensive blood supply via the renal arteries, which leave the kidneys via the renal vein. Each kidney consists of functional units called nephrons. Following filtration of blood and further processing, wastes in the form of urine exit the kidney via the ureters tubes that are made of smooth muscle fibers that propel the urine forward towards the urinary bladder, where it is stored and subsequently expelled from the body by urination. Urine is formed in the kidneys through a filtration of blood. The urine is then passed through the ureters to the bladder, where it is stored, and during urination, the urine is passed from the bladder through the urethra to the outside of the body. The kidneys filter blood and regulate sodium levels, remove nitrogen waste in the form of urea. So when you eat protein, which contains nitrogen, those nitrogen atoms eventually form the urea molecules. Urea is a waste byproduct found in urine. It also regulates blood pressure, okay? So regulate sodium levels, remove nitrogen waste in the form of urea, and regulate blood pressure, as well as lots of other things. Now, a hormone called aldosterone plays a central role in regulating blood pressure through its effect on the kidney. It is a very, very complex organ, and most people are born with 2 functioning kidneys, and your body, interestingly enough, can get by with only 1 working kidney, and that is why kidney transplants are so popular, okay? If you and I are a blood match, we could donate our kidney to each other, and if we just had 1 kidney remaining after that operation, well, that would be fine. A lot of students get confused with a similar sounding ureter and urethra. So I have a diagram labeled here on the bottom right. The ureter connects the bladder to the kidney, okay? When you squeeze to go pee, urine will travel through the urethra to expel it into, say, a toilet, okay? Now, a urinary tract infection, or so-called bladder infection, affects about 150 million people each year, and they are more common in women than men. Up to 10% of women have a urinary tract infection in a given year, and half of women have at least 1 infection at some point in their lifetime. The most common symptoms are burning with urination and having to urinate frequently. Drinking lots of water or antibiotics may be necessary to get over this, and this information is, of course, not a substitute for seeing your doctor and getting a physician's advice. It is most often caused by uropathogenic E. coli from the gut that enters the urethra and causes inflammation, as you can see in the figure here, okay? So, that was a lot, I know, but thank you for watching this super brief and very broad overview of the 12 major systems. I have talked about the integumentary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, and urinary systems. I've, of course, skipped the male and female reproductive systems, as I mentioned here on the slide. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to let others more easily find my channel when searching YouTube. It really helps me out. Have a great day, everybody.